Are you struggling to hire quality applicants for your open positions? If so, don't worry, you're not alone. And if you're anything like the others struggling out there, it could be that you're having trouble with, I know what you're thinking, hurry up! And to that I say, you're exactly right. Huh? Right about what? Hurrying up. You confused yet? Don't be. It'll all become clear because today on the Recruiting Roundup, we're going to be talking about reducing your time to hire. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Recruiting Roundup. Every month we're back to tackle another recruiting or talent acquisition topic. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like, share, and all that kind of stuff. If you see a button down there somewhere, click it. All right, back to time to hire. First, I want to make sure we're crystal clear on what I'm talking about here. Time to hire and time to fill often get thrown around in conversations together, and for some, they may even be interchangeable. But for what I'm talking about here today, nay. For our purposes, these are two separate and completely different things. Time to fill is the amount of time it actually takes to fill the job. Even there could be slight differences in definition, with some measuring that period as the time it takes from when the job becomes available up until someone is hired to fill it, while others start measuring the time from when the job is first advertised until it's filled. Time to hire, on the other hand, is a measure of how long it takes in between someone applying and actually being hired. So essentially, we're talking about the time it takes for someone to be hired for a position once they've applied versus the total amount of time a job opening remains vacant. For instance, if Company X has a job open up on June 1st and Johnny applies for said job on June 15th and is officially hired on June 30th, the time to fill is 30 days and the time to hire is 15 days.
You're amazing. You figured this all out already.
And it's that second number in my example, the time to hire number, that I think is really important, and that's what I want to focus on today. Why? Well, it turns out the longer your hiring process is, the more you could be missing out on those top-tier hires. And if you keep losing out on hires, that in turn contributes to your position staying open for even longer. So in essence, time to hire can have a sizable impact on the time to fill, which is why the hire time is where I want to laser in. According to a 2023 survey, 83% of hiring managers reported missing out on a good hire, and 29% of those attribute the loss to taking too long to make an offer. That same survey said it could take up to 11 weeks to hire a senior leadership position, which is a 57% increase from 2021. And when you take that data and combine it with findings from Indeed, a site that has over 350 million global monthly unique visitors and 15 jobs added every second worldwide, it becomes even more clear that time is definitely of the essence. Now, one major issue that is extending these hire times and has been on the rise in the past few years is ghosting. Indeed conducted a survey in which 77% of employers said ghosting has become more prevalent among job seekers starting in 2022 than in comparison to previous years. And now, I feel like if you're watching this, you probably have a pretty good handle on what ghosting is, but just in case there's a viewer out there who's not entirely sure of what I'm talking about here, in this context, ghosting is when a candidate just cuts off communication with no explanation and just kind of disappears. But why would anybody do something like that? Well, remember that increase in hire time I mentioned? Senior leadership positions taking up to 11 weeks to fill? Well, those aren't the only ones that have been taking longer to hire. According to that same survey, the average time to hire for entry-level positions is up to 5 weeks. Mid-level position hire time is up to 6 weeks, and manager-director positions average around 8 weeks. And these numbers are the average time to hire. So remember, that means from the time a person applies to the time that they're hired. We're talking multiple months here in some cases. And what do you think those prospective hires are doing during that month or two? Sitting around and twiddling their thumbs waiting to hear from you? No! They're out applying for other positions. And if they do apply and they do get hired somewhere else, do you think they're going to bother replying to you when you finally do get back to them? Nope. And there's your ghosting problem right there.
But you don't have to take my word for it.
And Indeed's data backs this up, with employers saying the number one reason they're being ghosted, the applicant received another job offer. So if time is money and the longer you have an open position equates to more money you're losing out on, and the longer it takes for you to move an applicant along, the more likely they are to ghost, we're left with one solution: speed up your process. Pretty simple, right? Now, I know there's a lot of factors that go into hiring someone, and some industries have even more headaches to deal with than others. But If you're in the market for quality hires, the bottom line is you stand a better chance of getting those top tier candidates if you can streamline your process and cut down on that time to hire. Now, over the past several episodes, we've talked about some ways you can incorporate to help you do this. Have all your apps and forms tested and built to be mobile friendly. Stay candidate centric and really focus on making the hiring process about the candidate's needs and not your own. And doing what you can to improve your employer brand can all help you find success. And they can all help in one way or another for your time to hire dilemma. Mobile apps are convenient and they can be a real time saver if they actually function properly. Making sure your team is focused on the candidate needs can help drive conversations and the hiring process in the right direction and either eliminate or move a prospect through more efficiently. And having that positive employer brand could even help some prospective candidates give you the benefit of the doubt and be willing to hang around just a little longer than they might otherwise if your hiring times are still a little slow. But those are all things we've touched on before, and you're here for new tidbits of information. Okay, here we go. Here's a few things you can layer on top of those suggestions to improve your efficiency and shorten that time to hire timeline. First, right from the start, you need to make sure that your talent acquisition team is clear on exactly what the requirements are. And I know this sounds like hiring 101, and it is, but if there is any gray area here, you can find yourself wasting a lot of valuable time on prospects who just aren't the right fit for you. Building off that, make sure you have some of those knockout or screening questions built into the apps themselves or brought up by your recruiting team. These can help you parse through a high volume of candidates really quickly. But don't forget, these applicants might not be right for this job, but they could be a good fit elsewhere or perhaps at a different time down the line. So don't just throw those out. Make a note or update any files you have or earmark them in your ATS if you think they could possibly work in a different role, even if those roles aren't currently available. It could come in handy later when or if they do open up. And speaking of ATSs, make sure you're taking full advantage of yours, making notes, setting reminders, scheduling communications. There's lots of little bells and whistles that are offered that, when used properly, can really help your team stay on task and keep candidates from falling through the cracks. Next, do all you can to get in touch with applicants quickly to set up any further communication. And again, this can tie back to how you're using your ATS, whether this is through an actual person or automated texts, emails, whatever. Doesn't matter as long as you try to establish contact early and stay in contact. And above all, be open and honest about your process. Clearly communicate a realistic timeline and the next steps. And notice that communication is an ongoing process. It's not just touch base immediately and then leave them hanging until you have time to get back to them.
What am I supposed to do? You won't answer my calls, you change your number. I mean, I'm not going to be ignored.
And while we're on the topic of communicating, get in that interview quick. In today's world, there is no excuse to not be able to figure out a way to get an applicant interviewed in a timely manner. If everything looks good on the form or app and they check all the boxes in the initial recruiting calls, move it along and set that interview up. If there's some issues with coordinating an in-person interview, there's a myriad of tools available to you now. Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, list goes on and on.
You just made the list!
Now, they may not necessarily be your cup of tea, but in a pinch, they are a great solution to help you get those one-on-one interactive conversations to move your process forward. As always, there are more things that could be said, but I do try to keep things relatively short and easy to digest here. If you haven't already seen them, I do recommend you go back and check out those other episodes I mentioned covering mobile-friendly, candidate-centric process, and cultivating your employer brand. If you'd like to talk to one of our associates for more ideas on how to trim your time to hire or about how we can partner with you to reach your talent acquisition goals, we'd love to hear from you. If you're watching on our site, there's a form down below for you. If you're over on YouTube, you can find a link down in the description. That'll do it for this edition of the Recruiting Roundup. Until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching another edition of the Recruiting Roundup. We really hope that the information is useful to you, and we really appreciate you coming to check out the channel. Speaking of the channel, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out some more of our content, like that right there. Shows it specifically for you. Or you can check out this playlist right there, which happens to be, let's say, listening in with my good buddy Seth. Okay, bye.